We only need 5 people for a quorum?
Yes, we have eight members,
Oh, we do.
so 5 is a majority.
Oh, and we have now 6. Okay.
Did we just?
Yes.
Oh, Julia. Perfect.
That's
So you can see the agenda, right?
Yes.
yeah.
All right, now I gotta switch it to, June said to tell you that she can't come tonight because she's attending the budget hearing, and she encourages you all to listen to the tape so you can learn how the budget process works.
Oh,
We'll talk
Sounds
more
good.
about the budget, what they did to it on Tuesday, in a little bit. Share screen. Okay, should we
I
see?
move that we accept the minutes from last meeting.
second.
Okay, any comments? The only comment I have is in the second bullet. Change submitting to submitted. And everything else looks fine. All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Minutes are approved. Share. Correspondence. We were forwarded another letter from John Prue from the First Selectman's office. And I thought about this, and I figured they didn't ask us to provide a response. And I really don't see a point in responding because nothing we say is going to change his mind.
However,
Pardon?
however, can I say something about the letter?
Yeah, in a minute.
Oh, okay.
There are some things that aren't quite accurate in here. He asked, what, why do we have a basis for declaring a climate emergency? Well, we aren't declaring a climate emergency. We're recommending the Board of Selectmen declare it. And we have as much right as any other resident or elector or taxpayer of the town to request that the Board of Selectmen do certain things, just as he has the right to, say we shouldn't do it. And the other thing that kind of gets to me is that, he was heavily involved in town government for a number of years. He was on the Planning and Zoning Commission. He was on the Board of Selectmen. During the time that the Coastal Resiliency Plan was being developed, they had all those public hearings and everything, and he didn't bring up his Barn Island data or any of that stuff during any of those hearings. He was a selectman when the Planning and Zoning Commission decided to make the Coastal Resiliency Plan a supplement to the POCD, and there were public hearings there. He didn't speak there, so I'm not really sure why all of a sudden he's bringing this up, but those are my comments. Susan?
Yes, my comment is, I want to say thank you, Mr. Prue, for sending this letter, because I think this is an opportunity for us. We're getting ready to put together our, public educational outreach presentation. And I think that a couple of his points do reflect what some of the climate naysayers are thinking. And that I would propose that we maybe use this letter to, and actually I've kind of already anticipated this, to look at our presentation, which I know is a different agenda item, and to say, have we really answered some of the allegations or concerns that he has raised? And I think there are 3 or so that we really could just add a bullet or something to our presentation that will rebut these particular concerns. So I look at this letter, and although I don't think we should respond directly, I think that it's an opportunity for us to prepare ourselves for people who think along the same lines, and fortify that presentation we're thinking about doing, which unfortunately means another draft. But on the other hand, I don't know if people agree, maybe it's worth it to offset some of the concerns that probably would be raised at the actual presentation. So I don't know if other people agree or think that's like crazy.
Well, what I think is that also we should probably send a letter to the Board of Selectmen saying we've reviewed John Prue's letters and we think most of his concerns can be allayed by listening to the presentation we're going to be giving soon. So rather than rebut each one in turn, we hope he will join us, and we're taking everything he has said carefully into account, and we think our presentation speaks for itself. And that way we don't have to fuss with him about every detail. But, you know,
I agree, because I think that if you try to kind of rebut everything, then it's just going to go into a negative space. I mean, you know, he's not a climate scientist either. So, you know, yeah, there's no need to kind of go after any of these, but I do agree with Susan that this does definitely tell us what's in people's minds, so we can make sure we're addressing these in the presentation. And then as those questions come back up, you can say, as we said in the presentation, you will notice. And I think that's great.
I agree with that approach 100%, because it sets the field at a place that they have to rebut, rather than interjecting that, no, that's not science. I mean, if we say, well, this is the science, this is what we have to do it from a planning standpoint, then you're right. It's already been addressed, and there it is. So I agree with that approach.
but I think also we should write to the selectmen and say that we know he has some concerns, and we trust that, you know, just so we don't look like we're completely buffaloed by this wonderful letter that's come, and just say we trust that that his concerns will be allayed by listening to the presentation we'll be making shortly. And that way, you know, that's a response for them to, if he comes to them and says, well, look at this, they don't even respond, don't even, you know, and then Danielle can say, well, they have a whole presentation they're going to do, and hopefully you'll be there and can listen to it.
Yeah, I like Susan's approach of incorporating it into the information into the presentation, but I also would agree that a letter to the selectmen would be helpful with those points highlighted. I do have a question though. The Barn Island study that he's referring to, basically what he's arguing, what he argued in the earlier letter was, you know, we're having too aggressive of a rate of sea level rise in what we're using. But Rick, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Don't we not have a rate dictated by the state in any of the planning exercises we do?
Yes. Yes, it's all based on the circa
Right.
forecasting model,
Right.
which is very similar to the NOAA model and the NASA models. I mean, they're all showing the same thing, basically that, you know, there's going to be a moderate level of sea level rise up until like 2040, 2050. And then after that, it all depends on what actions are taken in the next 8 to 9 years, depending on how bad the forecast gets.
Now, see,
So-
that's a good example of something that we could include in the presentation. That's just this, it's not confrontive. It just says, estimates for sea level rise and climate change have been based on state mandated, levels, and models that have been, identified by the state and whatever. I mean, not in a confrontive way, but that's a little tidbit that actually doesn't appear in our presentation. And that's the kind of thing.
There's a
Very good.
line, there's a bullet in there about that.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good. Well, maybe you, when we get there, you can tell us where that is. I didn't see it, but
All right.
Also, and I don't know whether it's in the presentation or not, but it seems to me somewhere I've seen a graph that shows what the carbon curve is. And it went along pretty steady, pretty steady, pretty steady. And then it went up like that, I believe. And that's what I believe the science is basing their predictions. So that you may be right that for the last 400 years, this was all just a long-term natural phenomenon that was caused some by subsidence, which you can't measure, I think he said, and some by the climate warming, and then introduce the huge carbon influence introduction. And that's what's driven the curves to go remarkably different than they were. And I think I've seen that graph somewhere.
It's in the presentation.
Oh, all right. I knew I'd seen it somewhere. So
You know,
that should just be pointed out that, yes, sir, it has been a constant for 400 years. And here's the other constant, and here's the difference.
What do you mean?
so I think Susan's nailed it. Let me just say that. But I read that letter over and over again several times, trying to understand what was being said. And I think in a nutshell, it says, we've got real data from two different sites, and that real data should be privileged above mathematical modeling. But mathematical modeling uses real data. And it uses not just sea level change data, but it uses things like the change in carbon dioxide and other kinds of things that go into the model. So I was trying to understand, a larger point is this. A model is based on data. And a model allows you to look at several different kinds of variables at once. One of them is the rate of sea level change. One of them is carbon. One is water temperature. I don't know what they've put into that particular structural equation model, but I'm sure it's knowable. And all the models are using these variables. So I don't want to go on and on, but to say that you're basing real data against a model doesn't seem to makes it seem as if one does not understand what a model is.
Well,
And
if you,
there are a lot of models in the slide presentation. So maybe one way to address it is the places in the slide presentation where they're projecting changes versus real data would be helpful.
well, if it's interesting, you know, that we're talking about models, et cetera. If you look at the original paper that he sent around that included the data on Barn Island, it is probably the most esoteric statistical analysis I've ever seen. And it's not geology more than it is really statistics. And knowing that, I mean, basically the authors of the article concluded, yes, the sea level is rising. So basically it gets back to the whole question of, well, what's the rate? And we don't really have a place to argue about what rate of sea level increase we're going to use. You know, we could sit here and argue whether it's a millimeter a year or it's a centimeter a year or 10 centimeters a year, and it doesn't make any difference. It is what the state has dictated it should be, unless we would want to go to court and fight that particular thing. And I don't think the town would.
So I guess the general consensus is we want to have a response back to the selectmen. Does anyone want to take a crack at writing what the response should be?
Sure, I'll write it.
Okay.
It's going to be brief because it's going to just say our upcoming public presentation, whatever we're calling it, in fact will address the points that he is raising.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as Susan says, we need to make sure it does.
Well, I mean, we don't have to like beat these points over the head, but I would like say we should take an eye toward the presentation and say, okay, some of the major points he's asked, is there a bullet somewhere that we can say, oh yeah, that answers that question. Oh yeah, that answers that question. Just so-
You might put those bullets in. You might put those bullets in green.
Okay. So how can we do this? Because we all have to approve it before we send it,
The letter or the presentation?
the letter.
Well, I can write the letter and then you can distribute it to everybody.
I
And we
guess,
can vote by mail. I mean, by email.
all right.
I mean, is that acceptable?
Officially, probably not, but we can probably get away with it since it's not going to be a very involved letter.
Can we make a movement and vote on the idea of the letter and what we have proposed for the content, and the actual wording will be sent by email later? The intent of the letter?
You can make that motion.
Sure, so moved.
Second,
Any discussion, any issues?
well, I think another thing that the letter says is we are not, the committee is not climate scientists. So I think the letter just might include a single sentence that says, maybe there are, maybe Dennis is a climate scientist. I don't know.
I wouldn't call myself a climate scientist. I am a geologist, but not a climate scientist.
Oh,
We do have several geologists.
Okay.
Or degrees in various things,
Right.
and marine
We can say
scientists.
we rely on
and-
I got some too, right? Okay. But I guess what the point I'm trying to make is it just might say, well, we're not specifically climate scientists. And there's somewhere is in the presentations like 98 point blah, blah, blah of climate scientists in the world do think that these models are
Valid.
and of sufficient strength in terms of the scientific data behind them, that actions need to be taken now.
Okay,
Yes.
I would endorse that because that in fact is one of his big comments is that,
That's why I'm responding to it.
right, if the volunteers are not trained scientists, then what basis do they have? So the answer is, we as the individuals are not taking the stance. We are basing our position on the preponderance of science that is presented by people who are acknowledged experts.
As well as having a consultant, Roger is a climate scientist, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm pretty sure that that remark from in his letter came from the recording of our last meeting, because I recall saying that we aren't climate scientists. But so he does listen to the recordings.
Well, maybe we should step it up and give ourselves some more credit. We've got a lot of, degrees, career, etc. on this task force that are actually quite impressive.
That's not a bad idea, a little CV resume from each person on the task force.
No, I don't think we want to.
I don't think we need to go there, but
But we wanted to keep this simple.
Yeah,
I think there's a fine line between acknowledgement and antagonizing.
no, I mean, in general, maybe we shouldn't be walking around saying, well, I'm not a climate scientist. We should be saying we're actually well-educated members of this community.
I think we say we're relying on 92% of climate scientists. I think that's what Sharon said. then I think that's enough, you know? But
All right, so Susan will draft a letter or a response, and I'll send it out to you for concurrence, and then we'll send it on its way.
We do have a motion on the floor.
The motion was,
Seconded.
The
to send the letter, right?
Yes,
And I thought we all, are we all in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Motion passes. Share screen. Okay, this is the current version of the presentation. Susan sent in the design for it and some new slides and some introductory slides, and I added some other slides and changed some of the slides from the link that Mary Ellen gave me. So I guess we can just go through this and see what we think.
Rick, before we go through it, did you ever get any feedback from Danielle about who she sees making this presentation? Like, is it conceivably her and Keith? Is it us? Is it like anybody?
The last thing that was at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and her comment was that she was still working on it and she would let the other two selectmen know what was going to happen in the near future. She hasn't yet said that there's going to be a presentation. And I was going to talk about that after we went through it, but we can talk about it now. If she doesn't want to do it or doesn't want to have a public forum, do we want to tell her that we'll do it on our own? And we'll just host it instead of a meeting one night?
Well, in the spirit of not wasting our time, I mean, we could just take the presentation as it exists and tell her we have a draft presentation, but we are waiting to finalize the presentation based on the specifics. Who's presenting, what the time frame is, and we're happy to like jump on it, but this is where we stand. We got something ready to go that just needs minor tweaks.
I think we said last time also that Sarah and Helen both volunteered to give the presentation. If we wanted to let them do it, or they're happy to do the presentation for whenever it happens.
I, without a doubt, think that they both should be involved in the presentation, but I am very fearful that there will be individuals who might be more forceful with how they feel that climate might not be as big as a problem, and I would never want to put them in the situation where they would have to respond to that. So I definitely think that they should be part of the presentation, and they should represent their voices, but I do think that we should have somebody else there to lead parts as well. My 2 cents.
I actually agree with that. I think that's kind of goes to the heart of the issue of who does Danielle say is responsible for this? If it turns out, let's say hypothetically, it is a climate change task force presentation, I think somebody from our group has to be represented as the moderator, the MC, the introducer, and that, Sarah and Helen can certainly play a big role. But I think we have to put our step forward, because this is going to be if it plays out that way, this is one of the first times we are being introduced personally to the community. I mean, even the coastal resilience plan was done by Keith and other people. So I think we have to represent ourselves to a point and also be prepared to handle any negative kind of feedback or unruly participants that might choose to step up and make a scene.
Yeah, and I think that it might make sense to have, even if people don't present or are part of the initial presentation, to have people introduced and perhaps specific people there to answer specific types of questions. You know, it's possible Roger could be there to answer, you know, the real sciencey questions, that sort of thing. So you can be, you know, specific about being there to support them too, and make sure that the most important points can be supported.
I like the idea of having Roger there as a expert backup person, if not a presenter as well.
So Sarah just put in the chat that would it be possible for them to read the slides and then step away from a wider discussion, or will the presentation and discussion happen simultaneously? So I think that is a very valid question, and I think that we don't know the answer to that yet.
We need to know what Daniel has in mind. Is this a public outreach thing? Who's doing it? We can't really come up with a delivery mechanism in the finality of it all till we really understand what the parameters are.
Yeah, would this ever raise to the level of being a town meeting?
I doubt it. It's more of a public forum like they had for the sidewalks and the, what was the other one they had?
Affordable housing.
Yeah, affordable housing.
I thought Danielle had proposed the option of going to a town meeting, although she said we didn't need to. I might be misremembering.
There was something, I think there was something that June said about if it had to go to a town vote. Like she was checking with the lawyer. Isn't that what she said a few months ago?
Well, they said the town attorney was involved, but they never told us what the involvement was. So I'm not really sure.
In my experience, you can go pretty far down the river before the town attorney decides to weigh in.
I would think that if the selectmen can decide on their own, that would be an easier route if they're deciding in favor than trying to go to a town meeting where there would be all kinds of excitement.
Yes, but it might be politically beneficial for them to act like it's a widespread decision and not something that they are mandating or deciding on their own.
That's a good point.
And then if it did go that way, there'd be a moderator appointed by the town. Is that correct?
Well, presumably.
So that would give coverage to whoever were presenting this, that as it can occasionally get a little bit out of hand, that there'd be a moderator that might be calling the shots saying, you know, sir, ma'am, you're out of order. I don't know. I was just wondering if that.
Typically at town meeting, there isn't a back and forth discussion. What happens is you get to go speak your piece, like pretty much like at their select meetings or at the budget hearing. You could talk, but there generally isn't a response from anything. So, I mean, that might be a more palatable way to present this, because then, you know, any naysayers can speak their turn, but they don't have to engage with any of us on the task force or Helen or Sarah. And I mean, they could set up those ground rules for a public forum too. I mean, you know, they just people get to speak their mind, and you know, then whoever makes the decision makes the decision.
So that brings us back to the starting point of the conversation. Do we need to wordsmith this additionally without having the information as to what the format's going to be and who's going to lead it? I'm happy to go either way, either procrastinate and call this a draft and put it on the shelf, or do we want to spend time on it tonight? I have comments and I can go either way.
I kind of agree with you to maybe just give it one more month to figure out what the format will be. Because if the format is a town forum, like we know all the information is there. We know we have the science, everything has been integrated in. I think reviewing just to make sure that nothing is missing would be great, but the actual like nitty gritty, that might change depending upon what format the presentation is. So I kind of would rather review it just to look at content and less on display, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you want to review it like right now, or you want to review it over the next month and come back in a month?
So like I've already reviewed it and took a look at it. I don't know if everybody else did. It seems like Susan did as well. I think just a discussion on if any content is missing, but not necessarily think about like what the slides look like or the delivery of it, because all of that might change depending upon what that final format will be.
Okay.
I have one general comment on it. I think it's the round two is a definite improvement over round one. It's much more readable and much more viewable in a presentation.
The photographs are very good.
Yeah.
Well, you want to just like run through the slides real quick, Rick? And then if anybody has a major comment, they just make a comment and we can keep moving.
Okay. So this first
everyone-
introduction slide Susan provided.
I think maybe bullet 2 and 3 might be changed in order to follow the presentation.
Good idea.
That was my interpretation of the whole presentation.
Putting
Switch
slides
to
up
it.
front is good.
Slide
First,
one.
the presentation reviewed the science, and then it got more into Stonington local stuff.
Okay. Any comments on this slide?
Well, I do have a comment. Something that occurred to me afterwards is that, didn't we talk about one of the issues of having a declaration of climate emergency was that once enough municipalities signed up to be in this, that there might be funding opportunities or grant opportunities for those that have this in place? Am I imagining that? Is that what's
No, we did say that, and the situation has changed quite a bit because of the new administration. Everything that I've been hearing, and if you read the news, there's going to be a ton of funding, and the state is going to have, if they pass these 3 bills, it's going to have funding as well. Because yesterday, Janet Yellen said, it's all about climate. I mean, everything that the that the Treasury Department is going to do is going to be climate related.
I'm fine with the slide. I'm just sort of thinking if we said that if there were potential funding associated with having this in place, that would be something to think about folding in somewhere, even as just a talking point.
Okay.
Okay, not to be, all right. This goes to the Prue letter. As a talking point, maybe having whoever is presenting can reel off the agencies in local, like Connecticut Deep, NOAA, Yukon Circa? Who is it that is saying these things, that it isn't just us? That's the rebuttal aspect to his comment that, we're not, despite Lindsay's comments, that we are not selling ourselves short. But this would be a good place to roll out maybe some specific names of who is actually making these claims, rather than just observations by scientists.
I
Could be just a
totally agree.
talking point.
I kind of agree with that, but then also on the later slides, it says where the data is coming from.
Oh, that's
Um,
true. Okay.
So, I mean, if you look at the slides in enough detail, it does say that, this data is from Circa or NOAA or whatever. But,
Right.
Or maybe a
it
state.
doesn't hurt. I mean, it doesn't hurt for the people that are presenting that if they want to mention different agencies, but and now with the new administration, even like today, the EPA said they're bringing back their climate website, which was done away with under Trump. So,
Yes. Okay, I wanted to make a point about this one. I really like this one. The prior slides were observational data over time. I don't want to spend too much time on Mr. Prue's letter, but he liked pristine data over time. This is the first time we see a model. And it's up until the light gray on the left-hand side, it's observational data. And then from the middle to, I've misspoken. On the left side, it's observational data. Then from the middle to the right-hand side, it's projection. It's based on modeling. I think this might be a good place to say that the model that has been developed fits the observational data. That's the light gray from the middle to the left. I'm not sure people understand models. Models come from data.
well, I'm confident that Mr. Prue does. He
I didn't know from reading the letter.
He is just basing his argument on historical data. He doesn't ever talk about the forecasting or the temperature rising.
And we present information from a model.
And in the previous slides, and during here later, there's another slide that has historical data from on the sea level rise. Well, when we get to it, we can show it.
Right, they're mixed.
This just shows that New England has already exceeded our 1.5 degrees of warming. We've seen this slide before, or this graphic before. This I got from Sheldon Whitehouse's floor speech. It was recommended that we talk to local fishermen, and this is data that or a speech that kind of reflects the same information. I mean, I don't know any local fishermen to talk to, so this is the best I could come up with. But it does show that the fishing industry is going to have a problem.
Rick, do you want a local fisherman to talk to?
I would welcome you talking to a local fisherman and coming up with a slide.
We could do that.
One picky point, increase in temperature affects, I think, isn't it affect with an A, not an E? Somebody who's the grammar person here. I think it's
Yeah.
affects with an A.
Effect is a noun. Affect is the verb. You are correct.
This was the same as the previous presentation. This slide was the same, showing the big jump up here in the last 100 years. This is another one that has, you know, the blue here, blue and green is historical actual tide gauge data. And this is New London. Doesn't say where it came from. But I mean, that's the same thing, you know, as Sharon was talking about before.
Not exactly.
Pardon?
No, it's not exactly. The prior one showed the model that fit the past data. There was a gray area in the prior slide that had a gray area around the actual data that showed that the model had fit prior data. I'm pointing at the screen here. From that, you see the gray area that encapsulates the red jaggedy line?
Yeah.
That's the model.
Well, I don't think we have one for that was for temperature. I don't think if you could find one for sea level rise, then we can use it.
No, I'm making a different point, and that is that we use models. And sometimes this one has projections, the prior one tested the model against prior data.
Well, this one has projections against data as well. It just doesn't have the historical modeling. But if you can find a different slide you'd like to use.
I think the slide is fine.
This is flooding events for New London. And it's projected for lower emissions and higher emissions. And the bottom graph here is actual flooding days. So that's as local as data as that we can get because there aren't any other tide gauges around in this area. This slide we've seen before, this graphic we've seen before. This one too. That one as well. This is a new one. This came out recently. And it's basically the ocean currents are slowing down. And they believe it's reaching a tipping point. And that what this will cause will be higher temperatures in Europe, but most likely higher sea level rise along the East Coast because the warmer temperatures of the ocean current are not moving, they're not circulating back down to the Southern Ocean. This we've seen before, Seaport. And these are just slides of local impacts that things that have happened over the last couple of years. This was the big flood when we had 10 inches of rain. And then also droughts. This slide is the same as before. So is this. This I took out of the Governor's Council on Climate Change report. It just shows what we have to do, how we have to increase different types of electricity in substitute for carbon fuel to get to their targets that the state is having. So you're going to have a lot of increases here in these different areas, electric passenger cars and things like that. This slide we had before, and it just shows that the longer you wait, the steeper the decline has to be. These are CO2 emissions by fuel type. This is the circuit chart. And this is the reference to the state statute that requires DEP to publish a scenario. And then up here at the top line, this is the 20 inches by 2050 that is in the planning documents. And next one is DEP webpage. These are just slides showing a moderate increase in sea level rise, and then if we miss every target, then what 7 feet will do. Impacts Stonington. That's a slide that I think Susan developed.
I did, and of course, this one actually kind of is part of the Prue letter again, where he says, are you worried? How does he say it? Should we be worried about declaring an emergency? And what is that going to do to, let's see, what are the adverse effects that an emergency declaration may have on real estate purchases? Blah, blah, blah. Any stigma we create may have townwide implications. And I think the answer is, well, it's already happening. People are already taking it into account, and that this is not something that this is not a big reveal, I don't think. Do you think this is do other people think this is too scary?
Yeah.
Not at all.
No. Realtor.com on their website now has flood factors for every house in the country. So when you're going out to look at real estate, it's right there staring in your face. I think Susan may have developed this too.
No, I think that you actually, I think you took something I had done and you put some of your own bullets in there. It's a blend, Rick. It doesn't matter. I think it's a blend.
All right.
I think I did do this one.
This one?
No, the one, yeah, that one.
This
I mean,
one?
not that it matters.
Next set.
Should we have a slide on what things Stonington's already doing?
I think somehow that gets them off the hook.
Well, we can. The thing is, we don't really know everything that Stonington's been doing. I'm finding out things. I've been finding out things as we go along. Like we just voted last weekend on adding LED lights to a couple of schools and the softball field. And in that discussion prior to the meeting, turns out the town hall and police station were already done. So, there are things that the town has done, but they don't seem to want to share the information. But we can put in a slide for the things that we know they've done. I mean, we've got the coastal resiliency plan, but
I think if we're trying to persuade people to adopt the emergency plan, we don't want to focus too much on the fact that we're coping. I mean, I think we ought to say, look, this is fire. We've got to take care of this big time. And I think pollinator pathways and everything are great, but I really think that we have to focus on the urgent need to do something urgent, and in a lot of different ways. And sometimes even discussing what people can do individually gets their mind off why we're here. We have, I guess, an obligation to tell people what they can do individually, but what we're trying to do is persuade them to adopt a climate emergency declaration, and all that implies, and all that's in the declaration that would put the town really far forward in this. That's just 2 cents.
I agree, Julia.
I do too. I think it's important to not only mention individual actions, but the power and the necessity of collective action.
So do we want to slide or we don't want to slide for what the town has done?
I'd say no. I think those are interesting points, but they're not the point we're trying to make right now. And they're certainly not enough. So let's not get distracted by the little things that we've actually been able to do.
Okay. Anyone feel strongly the other way? All right. So I guess when we send the response that Susan is going to put together and we approve, I can send a inquiry along to Danielle asking, what's the status of her public forum that she wanted to have on this, and what the format's going to be, if she's going to have it, or if she wants us to do this on our own, or whatever. I mean, it's dragging on since December now, so. Is that all right?
Yep, I think that's a plan.
Okay.
I think when you communicate with her, you could say that there is a draft presentation very close to being ready to go, but awaiting final tweaks based on the final approach and format.
Yeah, well, if anybody that watches this recording will see the slideshow anyhow, since we just went through it.
Right. I bet there are thousands of people waiting to watch this.
No, there aren't thousands, but there are some people that do watch these things.
Thanks, Susan and Rick. Done a great job.
I believe I don't have the agenda up. This is the next item on the agenda. We talked about writing a letter to the Board of Finance endorsing the Coastal Resiliency Reserve Fund. That Danielle proposed to him. And then I also added in, which we don't have to include if we don't want to, the position added to the planning department for climate. The reason I made it a triple environmental, climate, floodplain manager, it turns out when I was listening to the budget hearings, after Scott DeLetta left, he was the floodplain manager, and he was doing that in addition to his union negotiated job. No town employee that's on the current payroll agreed to be floodplain manager. So they have to subcontract it out because it's required for the flood program that we have a floodplain manager. And I think I spelled plain wrong there too.
Well, I think the letter is excellent as it is, and I 100% endorse submitting it as you've written.
I agree, and Groton has just requested that of their Board of Finance, however that works. Just a couple of weeks ago, they put that into a resolution. It's
Yes,
passed.
Groton is, it's in their budget. And I don't believe they have a Board of Finance like we do. Everything goes to the town council or the various committee of the whole, whatever, and it's a different budget process. When I was listening to the budget hearings on Tuesday, they started at a point where they were going to have a 10% increase in taxes. And they always start high like that, and then they start cutting things. As far as what we're concerned about, they cut the coastal resiliency line that I proposed at $500,000. Danielle had lowered it down to $30,000. And it's now down, or at least as of last Tuesday, it was back down to $10,000. They also cut out the open space funding that Danielle asked, which was only $25,000. But they did say that they have a reserve account that they could take money out if something immediate came up. And they also cut out completely the electronic vehicle charging station that I originally proposed for like around 20,000, and Danielle cut down to 2,000. So basically everything climate is status quo, and it's going to be this way probably forever, because that's the way our town budgeting works. I mean, they don't want to have a large increase in taxes, and because it can be, anybody can, or any 20 people can force a referendum on the budget or on pretty much on anything. As we had in the past, they were always having referendums, and we were voting multiple times. So they try and keep any increase to a moderate increase. But if you listen to the budget hearings, there's never enough money to do everything that we need done, and they just they kick the can down the road, say, well, we'll do without this. So and you feel bad for the employees. The town hall last year, they had space heaters in all the offices because the boiler is so old that it broke, and they had to get parts made for it. And three of the town trucks are like 20 years old, but there are contracted items, salaries and things that they have to fund. And so my point in rambling on here is that I doubt whether this manager position will get funded, but at least we can let them know that we think it's important.
I agree.
I agree completely. I think it's vitally important, because without these two things, nothing can happen, and so I just think that it's I think it's of vital importance.
So, I think the letter is great. I wouldn't change a word, but I think maybe we could pump up the rationale a little bit. We've just come through in the last 2 months, one of the biggest disasters that's hit the news in Houston and the southern part of the United States, but Houston in particular, where they kicked the can down the road for years. And as a result, they had a complete failure of their energy grid. And it's going to cost billions, if not trillions of dollars to fix it. I mean, that was a complete failure of government and something that was totally predictable. Climate change and sea level rise is totally predictable. So I don't know, I would consider inserting a paragraph, the very first paragraph saying, given the events in Houston, where we found out that in the interest of lower taxes, this was the result, this climate change task force is concerned about, and then the rest of the letter, I wouldn't change a word. I put the heat on them a little bit.
Well, in that case, it was saving on electric rates as opposed to taxes, but the same.
It's the same
thought occurs,
principle.
yes,
And they let it
yes.
go. I mean, the government let it go.
Yeah, they had the information, the same thing from 2011. It just
Yeah.
kept on going.
Because it was it may have been the electric grid, but it was a failure of government to protect the people.
I don't disagree with you at all.
Other towns are certainly moving forward on the idea of having a manager who particularly covers climate change and all the related things. Middletown already has one. He isn't full-time. Remember, Rick, when you asked us to find out what other towns were doing? And they have it, and it's really working well for them. They're saving tremendous amounts of money because you can coordinate all their activities across, the schools doing something, like building a new roof or putting in a new roof, then he can say, this group in town and this group in this town, this group in town are all in different silos, but let's get them all together and do the thing that's most effective for climate change. And I think we just need somebody to do that. I think it's one of the most important things the town can do. What focus on is very good.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I don't think we would gain any friends on the Board of Finance if we implied that they weren't satisfactorily protecting the people in the town by not funding things enough. They are, it's a tough situation for them. There isn't enough money, and they haven't raised, in my opinion, they haven't increased the taxes incrementally over the years so they can avoid this type of situation. But
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about making it sound like they're being derelict. I mean, in a sense they are, but it's a judgment call and subjective, and I'm not sure that, I think we kind of want them on our side. I don't think we want to create ourselves as opposites to what they're trying to achieve.
Is there a way to word it slightly differently so that it comes across as we all need to do this together and not, that you're wrong and we're right?
well, I don't know whether what we're asking for in the letter isn't necessarily right and wrong. I mean, the Coastal Resiliency Fund or the Climate Resiliency Fund is just a line item transfer of reserve money. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. So that's just building up, trying to build up a fund for future use in climate. The staff position would, if they hire the right person, would probably pay for itself, because there's all sorts of grants out there that they could win, that they could incorporate their salary into as far as managing different projects and stuff. Eastern Connecticut Conservation District just did a tremendous job on a draft watershed plan for Anguilla Brook and Wixie Cove, and they pretty much laid out what you have to do. And with Long Island Sound Futures Fund grants available, that person could get grants and pay for part of their salary with that. I don't think we're asking them to spend a lot of money to incorporate these things to get the town going ahead. And if we don't have a person, I believe that we're going to miss out on a lot of funding because everything I hear when I listen to the DEEP and the GC3 and now from the federal government, they all said that there's going to be funding for climate issues.
When is the meeting that, the next finance meeting?
They're meeting right now
All right.
tonight.
Well, I'm going to just say, in the
Public-
spirit of getting this submitted, because I think time is of the essence, I would propose that the letter, I understand, I think people have some good comments, but in the spirit of getting this letter in before their eyes, that I'd say I would submit it as is, rather than have another go around.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think definitely that, and I think it would be a very good thing if Rick maybe could talk to Danielle and express more fully the thoughts you've said just now. I think that sort of buttresses what you're saying, what you've said in the letter, and explains it very clearly in more detail.
Well, I think Danielle's already on our side. It's the Board of Finance.
Yeah, I mean, Danielle is trying everything she can, but it's really the Board of Finance and what the taxpayers will pay for. I mean, if enough people don't like the budget, they can always petition for a town meeting, and but the majority of the people in town are not going to vote for increasing taxes. They don't pay enough attention to it, and they just don't really care. I mean, they just want to pay as little as possible. The public hearing for the budget where people can actually talk is, I believe it's April 1st. I think it's on the town calendar. So that would be your opportunity to speak on anything you want to speak about. Typically, I don't know that there's a lot of people, but now that they're doing Zoom meetings, people might be calling in. But that is the only time that the public can speak on the budget.
Rick, if you know people on the Board of Finance, maybe what might be possible is for you to call one of them up and say, here, I've sent this letter, but I'd like to discuss with you more fully.
I don't know anyone personally on the Board of Finance. Most of my communications, even to Danielle, are email. She's just so busy that there's not a lot of time to talk. But so Susan, was that a motion?
If you want, if we need a motion, I make a motion that the letter be submitted as is in order to expedite it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
Okay. Did you get that, Mary Ellen? One abstention. All right, so I'll send that in. Share screen back to.
You skipped over the priorities list, Rick.
I figured I did. Okay, the priorities list. The inputs I got, let me go back to a screen. Were fairly widespread. I didn't get anything from Dana or Lindsay. The others. So I tried to tally them up, and I looked at different ways. What I came up with was a count of which of the people that submitted put in any type of score for a particular line, and then ranked them. And in this column over here called count, the ones with the most are the most popular, and it goes down. And then to break ties, I use the individual, the ratings and sum them up. So like on this top line here, the road new version of the flood prevention board won out over the rewriting zoning, just because of the rankings. And then I was looking at the list, and some of these things are pretty similar. So the ones in the colors, I combined into one item. So we have a new sheet of 14 items. And I'm suggesting that we take these 14 items and then rank them again, and then do another sort. Then we'll have a list of it. We can make a list of the top 10 or 14, and we can send that to the Board of Selectmen for our response to their request for a list. Now, the question I have is, do we want to drop any of these out of here? Like for instance, a lot of people pick either the Mystic water filtration plant or the pump stations as an item of priority. The town's already working on that in the $10 million bonding that they got last year to make the sewer line from Mystic go to Stonington. There was also money in there to start a review of how to replace the 3 WPCA facilities into one. So that's something that they're already doing. It doesn't hurt to put it in there as it's important. But if they're already doing it, that may make a difference in how you rate things. Same thing with the increased use of renewable energy. They are doing that with the lighting. The thing they're not doing is putting a solar in. So that we might want to still keep that in there for the buildings, for the school buildings and things. So what do you think?
I'd leave the list as is.
Okay.
I mean, that's just one opinion. But let me ask you this. Is it still make sense to give the things that we rate the highest number 1, or should we really reverse that and give it a number 10 for the most, like the most weight? So when you add up the numbers, the higher the number, the more desirable it is.
It doesn't matter, because what I did is I did a reverse sort.
All right, that's what you were explaining you did. Okay, okay, then that's fine. I was just mentally thinking, geez, I would assign the most weight to my first pick, not to my last pick. So I was having a logic point crisis there, but that's in my head, not to worry. I'm fine working with this list, but I'm open to what other people want to do.
Rick, which did you say the 2 were we would take out?
Pardon, you were breaking up.
Didn't you say that there were 2 that we should not consider?
Oh, no, I said that we could take them out if we wanted to, but we don't have to.
Which 2?
One was the water pollution control facilities. And the other was renewable energy for municipal buildings.
I think it's nice to say, we agree with some of the things that you've been doing, and support that. But these are other things that, we think may be sometimes even more important.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's 14 items and you're only going to rank 10 of them, so 4 of them aren't going to get ranked anyhow. So if you feel that these are already lower priority for things that we feel that you feel that need to be done, you just don't rank them.
Oh, so you're saying if we take out 2, then that means that 2 more make it onto our list of 10.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I see that point. I could agree with that.
Okay.
Rick,
So
have
I'll
you
send
sent this? Oh, you haven't sent this one yet, have you?
No, I'll send this out and you can send the things back to me.
Can you send out your other backup one that you had there where the colors are marked, just to see what your totals were so far?
Yeah, it's all in the same spreadsheet.
Oh, okay.
The different tabs on the
Different tabs. Okay.
spreadsheet. I lost my agenda.
It's public awareness, outreach and conferences.
Yeah, it just wasn't open here yet. Okay, they had the public hearing on these 3 bills. It went on forever. Most of the comments were on the 884 because that's basically an increase in gasoline prices. There wasn't a lot on the other ones. However, on 6441, when I sent my comments in, I also sent an email to Senator Summers and Representative Howard and copy to Danielle, asking them to support it. Danielle wrote a letter of support for the public testimony. I heard back from Senator Summers. She called me on another matter relating to the land trust, but she did say that while she was in support of it, she wanted to find a way to fold in the conveyance fee into a mortgage so people didn't have to pay for it up front. Representative Howard said he would co-sponsor the bill, which is, I was surprised, but happily surprised. So it does pay off to copy these people on different emails, and hopefully they take notice. The Westerly Sun article was interesting because North Stonington, they have a part-time grant writer who won $130-some thousand to replace a 30-year-old tractor trailer with an electric tractor trailer. Whether the town can come up with the rest of the money is another issue. Item C is just an upcoming TED Talk. I don't know if you people are familiar with TED Talks, but it's basically little lectures that people give. This one's being hosted at URI. It's a two-part series. Item D is a Circa webinar that looks kind of interesting, but I also have a conflicting Zoom meeting for that one, so I can't attend that one. Item E is about Graysdale Brewery over in Westerly, how they're capturing their carbon and putting it back into their products. Item F is about towns around the country or towns and cities that are banning gas appliances. You got to go all electric. And G, talking about the slowing ocean currents, which is where that graphic came from that was in the presentation. H, town meeting approved the changing over the lights and a deal with Eversource that their Eversource is leading up, and they will eventually lead to 12,000 a year in energy savings. Related to this is I came across a Green Bank webinar. They have a program, which I believe we'd be too late for this year, to put solar panels on every municipal property. Doesn't have to be on the roof, so they wouldn't have to impinge upon the warranty of the school roofs. They could put, carport type things in or over sidewalks, so they could just put if there's any empty space around. And it's a program that it doesn't cost the town anything. Green Bank owns the solar panels, so that you don't have to worry about any maintenance if they get damaged or anything. It just seems like a no-brainer, but we don't have anyone in town that talks to the Green Bank on a regular basis. So we don't get to participate in those things. And they probably have programs as well for if you listen to budget hearings, a lot of the high-back systems are old and they're pieced together, and they can't, they're buying parts on eBay for systems that don't exist, aren't made anymore. They probably have programs to upgrade high-back systems at little or no cost to town, or at least on low interest loans. But it's not something that we're participating in. And then this last one is just interesting. If you like listening to podcasts, they talked about different aspects of things that, one thing that was, I remember, was about recycling and how, we put all these things in the blue bin, but they eventually don't end up getting recycled. They just end up on the right now in Indonesia, they're just littering up their properties over there. And that's all I have. Anybody have any comments?
I
Nope.
wonder if Sharon could write to the Board of Finance and tell them exactly what she said, because what she said was important. We really do have to do it, or we're going to be in the same situation as Dallas. And I think
Well-
Sharon could say that. And you say what you say, and she'll say what she says, and that I think both those things are important. Maybe not, they're just not in the same letter.
Any resident can write to any board anytime they want. Most of the boards have public comment periods. It's just on the regular Board of Finance meetings, they have public comment, but they don't have it during the budget process for each of the different budget negotiating things. They save that for one lump sum at the end. So if you feel the urge to write to anyone, you can do that. Anyone else? Hearing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
When's our next meeting? Is it going to be, let's see, May?
We're scheduled for May, unless something comes up for April that we need one. I would say May would be the one. If Danielle comes back and says she wants to have a public forum or something, maybe the third third Thursday in April would be a good one. It all depends on her schedule and what they're doing. But
Sounds good.
it would be May for us. Yes.
May for us. Okay. Thank you all.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.